August 21st, 2020, I messaged my good friend and colleague, and I wanted to let her know that I submitted my letter for retirement. She congratulated me. She told me how happy she was, how happy she was for me. And she said it was about damn time. So yes, I realize I'm young, so you're probably wondering why I'm giving this story about my overdue retirement. Well, up until last August, I was a public educator. And when I was choosing my career, I chose to be an art teacher because I knew overall that I wanted to connect with learners. And I thought that the art room would be the best possible place to do that. And I absolutely wasn't wrong. I'm so grateful for the thousands of co-creators that I've had the opportunity to work with in the last several years, or the last 12 years of my career. Now, in my admittedly short career, I was able to amass a wide variety of experiences. I taught kindergarten through 12th grade in public, private, charter, cyber schools, in rural, urban, and suburban settings, even internationally. And while all of those situations were very different from one another, there was a common thread throughout all of them. I never really felt trusted. I didn't feel like the principals, the administrators, the managers who hired me and my colleagues for our skills and our talents and our experiences, that they really trusted us to perform our work professionally. And so there's no way that I could possibly reduce all of the details of why that was into a 5-minute spot. So I'll just say this: there was definitely a lack of autonomy and agency. Making independent choices as professionals and being a part of the decision-making and how our school operated, that just was really, really a rare incident. And it was all underlined by this very stifling pressure of evaluations and tests that were labyrinthine in nature, that did not measure how well we could engage with a learner, but rather how willing we were to comply with authority and with directions. And I saw the passion, the curiosity, the imagination, the integrity of my students and of my colleagues get processed through a system until it was pretty much reduced down to resentment, resignation, and complacency. I watched the identity of teachers erode in real time, over and over again. So when our school buildings were shuttered because of COVID, it gave teachers this very rare and short opportunity to demonstrate what we could do when we weren't tethered to so many constraints of the system that we know is fundamentally dysfunctional. And if you were paying really close attention at that time, you may have noticed in those first couple of weeks, we moved mountains to reach our kids. And that was absolutely not because of any directive, because frankly, administrators have no idea what to do when there's not a script in front of them. That was just a real demonstration of the passion and the dedication that American educators have. But of course, it only took a couple of weeks before the administrators and the politicians and the lawyers got involved. And then we were back to fitting into tiny boxes again. So now that brings me to the hardest part of the job. It was the things that we were told to do that we knew were harmful to our students, to ourselves, and to everybody. And even the leaders who were giving us these directives would admit that these things were not okay, and yet we were still expected to do them. And we could not challenge it, could not question it. We definitely could not say no, because that would absolutely result in shame, alienation. It would result in discipline or other retaliation. So nobody really said anything. That's not true. Everybody said a lot in the faculty lounge, a whole lot. And sometimes we even talked to our union, of course, but ultimately not enough was said to the people that needed to hear it the most, and the people who actually had the institutional power to change it. And so that was the part that I struggled with the most, because I couldn't not say anything. I spoke up for myself, I spoke up for my students, my colleagues, and for the state of public education. And well, I got the blowback. I felt the retaliation. I felt the alienation that I really can only describe as like being in one of those dreams where you're calling out for help and nobody even turns around. I became ill physically, mentally, emotionally, trying to just live in my values every single day, but also at the same time trying to play by these administrative rules. And despite all the alienation that came, you know, in the last year, I was not unfamiliar to the feeling of this, being one of the few people in my school that would speak out against this. But still, I couldn't accept the fact that I was the only person going through this. And so I did what a lot of people did in 2020. I went online seeking connection. And it took a little digging, but eventually I found someone. And that conversation with that stranger was life-changing. And that person is one of the most important people in my life right now. And I still have never met them in real life. We shared our stories, and it was just amazing hearing our own stories echoed between us, just with like a different title, you know? And it was just it was so cathartic. And over the last months and up until now, I've met thousands of educators who have similar stories. Stories about everyday educators that would make your jaw hit the floor. Like the story about the teacher whose leadership reported them maliciously for doing something inappropriate with a student. And while there is undeniable evidence that nothing happened, and while their name was cleared from that story, to this day, they do not feel comfortable talking publicly and exposing what happened, because simply by putting their name next to the details of that report would tarnish their reputation in perpetuity. And they are not willing to risk not being able to do the thing that they love, which is teach. Or the other teacher who was stalked by her mentor, and despite going to her leadership and her union for support and protection, nothing changed. And eventually, over time, the stress became so great that they developed a life-threatening illness. And then there's my story, the story of an elementary school art teacher who was falsely accused of 3 nonviolent felonies by her own building principal, which led to several armed police officers raiding her home top to bottom while her children were there, who had to retire at the age of 35 because the abuse and the retaliation became so internalized that she could no longer imagine a world that had her in it. I did not resign. I did not quit. I retired. Because it doesn't matter where I would go to teach, the system is built in a way that no matter where I go, this would be allowed to happen. And it would be so hard to get justice for it, because it is. I made a conscious decision to draw a line for myself, and I retired. Thank you for listening to my story. And if you're an educator, I just encourage you to not wait too long to tell yours. If you know educators, or if your students have educators, please reach out to them, ask them how they're doing, tell them that you're listening, because they might be holding on to a story that is long overdue. Thank you.